Coming at ya from Bellingham, Washington, this is Two Nuts in the Sack. I'm Julie.
And I'm Gavin. 148 years ago, on March 1st, 1872, Ulysses S. Grant signed legislation creating Yellowstone, the first national park. Not much was known about the area except it was beautiful, majestic, and needed to be protected. A landmark legislation, it was considered the best idea the country ever had. But the beauty was only skin deep. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Yellowstone Caldera, the gigantic supervolcano that is 55 miles long, 20 miles wide, and 3 to 9 miles deep. The area is subject to thousands of earthquakes and seismic events. The clockwork eruptions of Old Faithful are all indicators that there's a lot of activity in the more than 1,000 square mile caldera. So cross your fingers that this giant doesn't blow in this explosive episode.
The caldera formed during the last of 3 super eruptions over the past 2.1 million years ago. The Mesa Falls eruption 1.3 million years ago, and the Lava Creek eruption 640,000 years ago. The calderas lie over a hot spot under the Yellowstone Plateau, where light and hot magma from the mantle rises toward the surface. The hotspot seems to move across terrain in the east-northeast direction. The hotspot is much deeper than terrain and remains stationary while the North American plate moves west-southwest over it. Over the past 18 million years, this hotspot has generated a succession of violent eruptions and less violent floods of basaltic lava. These eruptions have helped create the eastern part of the Snake River plain from a once mountainous region. At least a dozen of these eruptions were so massive that they are classified as super eruptions. Volcanic eruptions sometimes empty their stores of magma so swiftly that the overlying end collapses into the emptied magma chamber, forming a geographic depression called a caldera.
As a matter of fact, one of those caldera is the result of a 50-mile stretch of mountains falling into the magma chamber after it had been released.
Yeah, just being swallowed.
Just flattened.
The loosely defined term supervolcano has been used to describe volcanic fields that produce exceptionally large volcanic eruptions. Thus defined, the Yellowstone supervolcano is the volcanic field which produced the latest 3 super eruptions from the Yellowstone hotspot. It also produced the additional smaller eruption, creating the west thumb of Yellowstone Lake 174,000 years ago. The Island Park Caldera super eruption, which produced the Huckleberry Ridge tuft, was the largest and produced 2,500 times as much ash as the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. The next biggest super eruption formed the Yellowstone Caldera and produced the Lava Creek tuft. The Henry's Fort Caldera from 1.2 million years ago produced the smaller Mesa Falls tuft, but is the only caldera from the Snake River plain Yellowstone hotspot that is plainly visible today. Non-explosive eruptions of lava and less violent explosive eruptions have occurred in or near the Yellowstone caldera since the last super eruption. Currently, volcanic activity is exhibited via numerous geothermal vents scattered throughout the region, including the famous Old Faithful geyser, plus recorded ground swelling indicated ongoing inflation of the underlying magma chamber. The volcanic eruptions, as well as the continuing geothermal activity, are a result of a great cove of magma located below the caldera surface. If the pressure is released to a sufficient degree by some geological shift, then some of the gases bubble out and cause the magma to expand. This can cause a chain reaction. If the expansion results in further relief of pressure, for example, by following the crust material off the top of the chamber, the result is a very large gas explosion. According to analysis earthquake data in 2013, the magma chamber is 80 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide. It also has 4,000 kilometers underground volume, of which 6 to 8% is filled with molten rock. This is about 2.5 times bigger than scientists had previously imagined it to be. However, scientists believe that the proportion of molten rock in the chamber is much too low to allow another super eruption. Thank God.
As a comparison, let me tell you a story about another volcanic eruption that happened on April 13th of 1815. Over the course of 3 months, from April to June of 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted and sent a pyroclastic ash cloud and 12 cubic miles of sulfurous gas and carbon dioxide.
Oh my.
25 miles into the air.
Wow.
Rivers of flame and ash poured down the mountain, engulfing the island of Sumbawa. Forests and grasslands burned. The ground shook with such force that tsunamis were sent racing across the Java Sea.
Freaky.
It's estimated that 10,000 people died instantly.
That's awful.
Tragic to be sure, but it was the following year that makes the Tambora eruption more significant. Climatologists have theorized that the Tambora eruption was in part responsible to what they colloquially call the year without a summer. Mostly affecting the northern hemisphere, the largest recorded volcanic eruption in almost 1,300 years, caused or added to, as historian John D. Post referred to it, the last great subsistence crisis in the Western world.
I can't imagine going through that, like not having a summer, like, oh my God.
The climatic aberrations of 1816 had its greatest effects on most of New England, Atlantic Canada, and many parts of Western Europe, but affected Asia first. The particulates and gases that erupted into the atmosphere caused drops in temperature. The cold weather killed trees, rice crops, even water buffalo. Floods destroyed many remaining crops because the monsoon season was delayed, resulting in overwhelming floods in the Yangtze River Valley. In India, the delayed summer monsoon season resulted in torrential winter downpours, aggregating the spread of cholera from Bengal to as far north as Moscow. Low temperatures and heavy rains caused crop failures throughout the north of Europe. Famine ensued. With the cause of the famine unknown to the people, the price of food rose dramatically. People mobbed grain markets and bakeries, leading to riots, arson, and looting in many cities across northern Europe. In North America, the spring and summer of 1816 hosted a, quote, dry fog that reddened and dimmed the sunlight. No wind or rainfall could disperse the fog. A stratospheric sulfate aerosol veil, a direct result of the volcanic eruption of Mount Tambora nearly a year prior. New Englanders and Eastern Canadians were accustomed to long winters, but at higher altitudes where farming was problematic even in good years, this was devastating. In May 1816, a prolonged frost killed most of the crops in higher elevations across New England. Snow fell in Albany, New York on June 6th. The frost and cold snaps continued into August in much of the upper northeast. Temperatures reverting from the normal to above normal temps as high as 95 degrees Fahrenheit fell to near freezing within hours. A retired Thomas Jefferson was forced to apply for a $1,000 loan to counteract debts incurred by his failing crops. On September 13, 1816, a Virginia newspaper crop report stated that corn harvests would be 1/2 to 2/3 less than previous years. Cold and drought had decimated crops across the board. Some regional farmers were able to raise crops to maturity, but the demand far outweighed the supply, and prices rose dramatically, especially because of the lack of transportation infrastructure in 1860, prompting many to move toward the westward expansion for survival alone. In short, the natural disaster evolved into a global catastrophe.
Sounds like it.
Famine, disease, death, and destruction, like the Four Horsemen, went out for a trot across the northern hemisphere.
Yikes.
The Tambora eruption was massive and affected a global climate change. If the Yellowstone Calderas were to erupt again as a massive supervolcano, it would be almost 20 times larger and would affect the entire world.
Oh my god.
The initial explosion would decimate 40 to 50 miles in any direction from the caldera instantly. The initial burst would spew a cloud of molten rock and ash up to 200 miles from the caldera. And that would only be a third of the ejecta from the volcano. The remaining 2/3 would blow into the atmosphere. The entire Midwest would be covered in a foot-deep coat of ash and pumice. The rest would get caught in the stratosphere and enshroud the earth, causing the climate to cool. Crops would fail. Famine would follow. The effect would last for years. Though not a death sentence for all, it would leave a blemish on human history, and not just the gaping hole in the earth.
Volcanic and tectonic actions in the region cause between 1,000 and 2,000 measurable earthquakes annually. Most are relatively minor, measuring a magnitude of 3 or weaker. Occasionally, numerous earthquakes are detected in a relatively short period of time. An event known as an earthquake swarm in 1985, more than 3,000 earthquakes were measured over a period of several months.
Jesus.
More than 70 smaller swarms were detected between 1983 and 2008. The USGS states these swarms are likely caused by slips on pre-existing faults rather than by movements of magma or hydrothermal fluids. In December 2008, continuing into January 2009, more than 500 quakes were detected under the northwest end of Yellowstone Lake over a 7-day span, with the largest registering a magnitude of 3.9. Another swarm started in January 2010 after the Haiti earthquake and before the Chile earthquake, with 1,620 small earthquakes between January 17, 2010 and February 1, 2010. This swarm was the second largest ever recorded in the Yellowstone Caldera.
That's insane. 1,000 earthquakes in less than a month?
Oh yeah, man. The earth was a rockin'.
Don't come a knockin'.
The largest of these shocks was a magnitude 3.8 that occurred on January 21st, 2010. This swarm reached the background levels by February 21st. On March 30th, 2014 at 6:34 a.m., a magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck Yellowstone, the largest recorded there since February 1980.
That's enough to be felt.
In February 2018, more than 300 earthquakes occurred, with the largest being a magnitude 2.9. Just a baby, but that's still a lot of earthquakes.
Yeah.
The last full-scale eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano, the Lava Creek eruption, which happened 640,000 years ago, ejected 240 cubic miles of rock, dust, and volcanic ash into the sky.
Yeah, as I read it, it stretched all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico is where they found ash.
Basically, they couldn't even see their burritos. I'm just kidding. Geologists are closely monitoring the rise and fall of the Yellowstone Plateau, which has been rising as quickly as 0.6 inches per year as an indication of changes in the magma chamber pressure. The upward movement of the Yellowstone caldera floor between 2004 and 2008, almost 3 inches each year, was more than 3 times greater than ever observed since such measurements began in 1923. By the end of 2009, the uplift has slowed significantly and appeared to have stopped in January 2010.
So basically it was a swelling. It's like the earth was breathing. So the uplift is the ground level literally rose about 3 inches a year.
The USGS stated that uplift of Yellowstone caldera has slowed significantly. The uplift continues but at a slower pace. The U.S. Geological Survey, University, Utah, and National Park Service scientists with the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory maintain that they see no evidence that another such cataclysmic, I can't pronounce that,
Cataclysmic.
Excuse me, my words. Eruption will occur at Yellowstone in the foreseeable future. Thank God for that, Gavin.
Yeah. I don't want to see that in my lifetime.
Nor do I. Reoccurrence intervals for these events are neither regular nor predictable. This conclusion was reiterated in December 2013 in the aftermath of the publication of a study by University of Utah scientists, finding that the size of the magma body beneath Yellowstone is significantly larger than thought. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory issued a statement on its website stating, "Although fascinating, the new findings do not imply increased geological hazards at Yellowstone, and certainly do not increase the chances of a super eruption in the near future." Contrary to some media reports, Yellowstone is not overdue for a super eruption. As I said earlier, thank God for that.
Yeah, but keep coming to Yellowstone, you won't get burned up.
Basically. Over media reports, they're more hyperbolic in their coverage. A study published in GSA Today, the monthly news and science magazine of the Geological Society of America, identified 3 fault zones on which future eruptions are most likely to be centered. 2 of those areas are associated with lava flows aged 74,000 to 70,000 years, and the third is a focus of present-day seismicity. In 2017, NASA conducted a study to determine the feasibility of preventing the volcano from erupting. The results suggested that cooling the magma chamber by 35% would be enough to forestall such an incident. NASA proposed introducing water at high pressure 10 kilometers underground. The circulating water would release heat at the surface, possibly in a way that could be used as a power source. If enacted, the plan would cost about $3.46 billion. Not that much, right, Gavin?
Oh yeah, the wall is cheaper.
Nevertheless, according to Brian Wilson of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a completed project might trigger instead of prevent an eruption. Studies and analysis may indicate that the greater hazard comes from hydrothermal activity, which occurs independently of volcanic activity. Over 20 large craters have been produced in the past 14,000 years, resulting in such features as Mary Bay, Turbid Lake, and Indian Pond, which was created in an eruption about 1300 BC. A 2003 report, USGS researchers proposed that an earthquake may have displaced more than 77 million cubic feet of water in Yellowstone Lake, creating colossal waves that unsealed a caped geothermal system and led to the hydrothermal explosion that formed Mary Bay. Further research shows that very distant earthquakes reach and have effects upon the activities at Yellowstone, such as the 1992 7.3 magnitude Landers earthquake in California's Mojave Desert that triggered a swarm of quakes from more than 800 miles away, and the 2002 7.9 magnitude Denali Fault earthquake 2,000 miles away in Alaska that altered the activity of many geysers and hot springs for several months afterward.
Which just shows the interconnectedness of volcanoes throughout the world. and it like really is a punchline for the Ring of Fire.
Johnny Cash, Ring of Fire?
No. The Ring of Fire is a system of volcanoes that includes the Yellowstone Caldera.
And it burns, burns, burns.
But the flames rage higher. And will all be consumed by that Ring of Fire.
Wow, that's really bad. In 2016, the United States Geological Survey announced plans to map the subterranean systems responsible for feeding the area's hydrothermal activity. According to the researchers, these maps could help predict when another super eruption occurs.
Yellowstone National Park is undoubtedly a beautiful and majestic place, full of mystery and wonder, and has a literal underlying danger. We've been pouring on the doom and gloom and paranoia, while the possibility of the super eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano exists. Much smarter people than us continue to assure us that we are millennia away from even coming close to an eruption of the magnitude, or should I say, magmitude.
Ah!
Dad joke, left field. The United States Geological Survey is constantly monitoring the seismic and volcanic activity in and around Yellowstone. They believe that the activity they are seeing, the geysers, the microquakes, gas vents, are enough to alleviate the pressure of the large magma pocket under the caldera, preventing a super eruption.
So basically the lava is like building up.
Yes, at a rate of about 2 inches per year. So it's got a 9-mile cavity to fill, and it's going at 2 inches per year. So we've got some time. That all said, volcanology is a...
Volcanology. Live long and prosper.
Volcanology is a theoretical and hard to predict science. We may not be due for a super eruption anytime soon, but no one can know for sure. And if that ain't a kick in the sack, I don't know what is.
All right, everyone. Be sure to go to our Facebook page, Two Nuts in the Sack. And then please check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, comment, give feedback. Let us know what you think. We're excited to hear back from you.
Yeah. The YouTube channel is Two Nuts in the Sack. No spaces. It's single word. If you don't type that single word, you get some really weird stuff. Mostly guys getting kicked in the nutsack. So,
we don't need to see that.
So please, type it in correctly. Two Nuts in the Sack. No spaces. Like, comment. For the love of God, comment. And let us know what you think. Because we love you guys.
This is Two Nuts in the Sack, signing off.
Goodbye.